Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to my Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Thank you. Welcome to the party, pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 64. I have Ed Hoefer back on for our second visit, and we're going to talk about Gordon Lightfoot, Tina Turner, and more recent developments, see what's going on right now in the world. It's been a very interesting time, especially with the some of the indictments and some of the other things going on. Maybe we'll get to the war. It's hard to say, but we'll see what happens. So how are you doing, Ed?
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
It's great having you back. I really loved your comments on Gordon Lightfoot. I mean, my dad loved him, and it's been about a month since he died, but it's still something that's been on my mind. I don't know of a guy in music who's hit me this hard.
Yeah, he was a really big influence on me growing up. I don't remember the first time I heard him. I want to say it was in third grade back in 1980. And he was just something else, just something very special.
You don't remember the particular song or anything like that, or that really stands out?
It might have been The Wreck of Edmund Fitzgerald. Might have been the first thing I heard from him. When I was young, to be honest, I got him mixed up with Dan Fogelberg a lot. I thought they were the same guy when I was 7 years old.
I can see that. That I can see that. Yeah, there was definitely some similarity there, although Gordon's a little bit lower, but the style of music was somewhat the same. Yeah, Dan Fogelberg. I think Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald was the first thing I knew too. First, I think, the way it told a story, and it kind of pulls you in, and also it's also a very long song, especially when you think about all the lyrics in it. I mean, there are songs that are longer, but a lot of longer songs are a lot of instrumental parts.
Well, it tells a full, complete story, and it's a pretty complicated story. So it's, even though there are songs that are longer, it packs so much content in there. It feels like it's a lot longer than it is. I mean, I enjoy it. I don't feel like it's dragging on. It just feels like some kind of an epic poem as opposed to just a song.
Yeah. Epic poem is a good way to describe it. And to think that you could put that together and make a hit, the song doesn't have a chorus. He just tells the story, about these guys who were, saying on a ship sailing some iron. I guess they're shipping iron ore, and the ship goes down in Lake Superior, and that's the end, and they don't really know what happened. One of the memories that always stands out, the church bell chimed, it rang 29 times. I mean, that's one of that's the one, probably the hook in that song for me. That the one line. I don't know if there are any hooks that stand out for you, but that's one that stands out for me.
Well, to me, yes, the bell is important. I really enjoyed For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. I didn't read that until much later. And as a kid, I just liked the song. I didn't really understand much about it. As I got older, though, and I read John Donne and Ernest Hemingway, then the significance of the church bell got a lot stronger for me. And so, yes, the church bell is an important part of that song. And it really does have a strong emotional impact, even if you don't understand the significance.
Yeah, I think there is. I think that's part of what got it. There was a deep sincerity to his music that I don't think people that if you can appreciate that kind of sincerity, you immediately detect it, and if you don't, you just don't appreciate it.
Yeah, sincerity, authenticity, and an unflinching honesty. In a lot of his other songs, what's the one that I'm thinking of? It's about a relationship that's gone bad.
Sundown?
No. That one's probably my favorite song. There is another one where
If You Could Read My Mind.
It might be If You Could Read My Mind. Yes. No, there's another one, and I just can't remember the title. Where he is unflinchingly honest about his own failings in the relationship. And while many singers occasionally expose their own flaws, I felt like Gordon Lightfoot really let you inside his life and
Yeah,
showed you exactly who he was without hiding anything, even if it was
yeah,
maybe a little embarrassing.
and the other thing too is he comes off as being sensitive, but I don't really get the impression that he's a weak man. He doesn't come
No,
off
no,
coward.
no.
He
You have
comes
to be
off as
strong to be honest.
there's an authentic, but there's still very much a masculinity there that I don't know if that exists anymore because you see some of these guys who are sensitive, but they're just but they seem to think sensitivity means putting on a dress or wearing high heels and walking a mile. It's just that I
Or
think,
like in Interview with a Vampire,
yeah,
the Brad Pitt character Louis was very sensitive, and he wore his feelings on his sleeve, and he was emotional and weepy all the time. And Gordon Lightfoot was very sensitive, but he wasn't negative and weepy. He was open to the world as it is, I think, to where he could appreciate the early morning rain, for instance,
yes,
and tell everything the way it was, the good, the bad, the ugly, the strong, the weak. He didn't have a one track personality or emotion, and he brought you along for all of it.
yeah, he definitely did. Another song I've come to appreciate also is "Rainy Day People." Uh,
That's a really good one.
and it's really just about these people who are there when things aren't good for you, and it's just those are your rainy day people.
Hmm. That's a good
Uh,
example of how he was sensitive but not melodramatic.
yeah,
Very light-hearted song, very real.
yeah, it also helps that Gordon was a really good singer, and for me, one thing that really makes somebody a good singer is can I hear this song once or twice and pick up most of the words? Because there are so many singers who could never make Wreck of the Edmonds Fitzgerald work because you can't because they're almost inaudible.
Well, if you're not articulate,
Yeah,
then it's a lot harder to get the message.
yeah,
And I guess with, for instance, dance music, you're not wanting to hear the words so much.
yeah.
You don't need to hear the words as much. So it's not as important. Gordon Lightfoot, you can dance to him, but that's not why it's there. His
I think
music
you.
is there for much more important things than, oh, important's the wrong word. Dancing is really important too. Gordon Lightfoot's music has a lot of dimension to it, so it expands beyond just dancing, beyond just sitting around listening. It's almost like you're living the music. So you have to be able to understand the words.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I mean, I don't. I'm trying to think of some vocalists who are just completely inaudible, and uh, because I don't know if anybody's ever has anybody even tried to cover "Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald." I don't think anybody has, because it would just
Well,
be
everything's covered on YouTube. I don't know that
yeah,
any big name artists have tried to
yeah.
cover it.
And considering the subject matter, I don't know how coverable it is either. I don't know if that would gain a lot of popularity if you tried to cover that song. It's yeah,
Yeah, it's a niche song. You cover it. I mean, it was a moment in time, and
yeah.
that moment has passed. The only way you could cover that song with any legitimacy would be after a freighter goes down that really impacts society. And I don't know that that happens often enough for people to care anymore. People cared about the Edmund Fitzgerald when that went down, but now I don't know that anybody would care if an anonymous container ship sank.
Yeah.
And it's unlikely that anybody would die on it. What with our meteorology today, we would know what was going on. It was too dangerous, so we'd get everybody off and let the thing sink.
With all the radios and just what we know now, yes, it's probably even less likely to happen. I mean, back then they had radios, but it doesn't even sound like they, got out that many calls for help. Of course, in this day and age, you'd probably have 40 guys on the same boat, all calling their families. Honey, we're going down. It's in fact they,
Well, part of actually, that's a good point. Part of what made the Edmund Fitzgerald so poignant was the mystery. Nobody knew exactly what happened. It just disappeared, and there was a lot of supposition for a while. Now they have found it,
Yeah.
and I want to say it's been found for more than 10 years, but for a good 20, 30 years, nobody knew what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think they have those, those flight recorder logs like they have on airplanes, where you have a cockpit log or something like that, where something's recording the conversations in the captain's area.
So I think I remember the song I was referencing earlier. Have you heard Song for a Winter's Night?
Song for a Winter's Night. No, I don't know that one, unfortunately.
That's a Gordon Lightfoot song that I really enjoy, and I'm not sure how he wrote it, but when I hear it, I feel like he's snowed into a cabin in Alaska or upstate Michigan, something where he can't get out and he's trapped for 2 months. And it's a song that
Yeah.
he's singing to his lover or his wife,
Yeah.
and it just feels so real and personal. And he's
Yeah.
talking about why he's in the cabin, and it's because of personal failings. And maybe she's not there because she doesn't like him anymore,
Yeah.
and maybe she does still like him, but he doesn't know. And he's just got all this doubt and uncertainty and anxiety, and he's honest about it, and he's sincere and open, and he lets you in completely so you can feel it all the way.
Yeah. In Gordon's case, it was probably in a cabin up in Ontario, but yeah.
He was snowed in somewhere.
Yeah. Because well, Gordon was definitely Canadian. There's no doubt about that. Also, I think also the Canadian Railroad trilogy is a very powerful song, and it's just glorifying all these men who built the railroad. That's really something that you don't get much in music anymore. Where just this, song that these men who do this work are the heroes.
Yes, and today I'm not certain that people can really appreciate the railroad the way someone like Gordon Lightfoot could. I don't know that I can appreciate the railroad. I've been on a few trains in my life. I've never relied or depended on them to my knowledge. I mean, I get food and stuff off the train, but I don't know that it's actually coming off a train. Maybe it's coming from a truck. With Gordon Lightfoot and society in the early 20th century, the train was their version of the internet. And a lot of the words we use for the internet, for instance, just going online, online is a railroad term. And the railroad had much more significance back then than the internet does today in ways that we just take for granted.
That's certainly a good point. Yeah, I mean, it is something we take for granted. The railroad was really the first, and of course, terms like the information superhighway, the first superhighways really were railroads. It was it really is a great accomplishment. I mean, I think there were a lot of similarities. I think between Gordon and Johnny Cash in that sense. I
Well, they were certainly in the same genre.
yeah. Yeah, there are some comparisons to Dylan, but I don't want to. I don't want to compare him to Dylan because Dylan couldn't sing worth a damn. I mean,
Bob Dylan is his own genre all by
yeah,
itself. He was kind of an activist folk
yeah,
lyricist. I mean,
oh yeah,
he really wasn't a great singer, and that's part of why he became so popular. I love Bob Dylan. I'd
yeah,
rather listen to Gordon Lightfoot's voice.
yeah,
Bob Dylan had some messages that, because of his voice, came through stronger. So
yeah. I can imagine. I can imagine Gordon doing a really good job with like a Rolling Stone. He would make that sound great.
he probably did. Maybe
Or
we should try and find a B side or some bootleg of him singing Bob Dylan. That would be interesting.
or positively Fourth Street or Lay Lady Lay. I mean, because Dylan probably does rank as one of the greatest songwriters of all time. I want to put that out there. I mean, he
Oh,
wrote some great songs and wrote some great songs for other people. And
he stands all by himself.
curiously enough, Jacob, his son, does have a pretty good voice. But yeah, yeah. But of course, I don't know. Yeah, it's really and I could be wrong, but how many people were? Well, the Guess Who and Bachman Turner Overdrive Was there really anybody who from Canada who made it big in America before those guys did?
I'm sure there is, but I can't name them. I'm sure there's been a lot of crossovers
Yeah.
that just have fallen out of uh, popular knowledge.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, somebody who had a top 10 hit or something like that. I can't really think of anybody who did. I mean, we obviously we had the British invasion with the Beatles in 1964, but the Beatles were just so huge.
Well, until the Beatles came along, though, we didn't really have the music industry the way we feel about it today. Because until you had studio produced music, things were a lot more rough, a lot less produced, lot less clean. So
Oh yeah,
everybody before, like Louis Armstrong in his early days, we don't have any of the material that Louis Armstrong did when he was young because there were no recording studios that were more than just a microphone and a record. And for Louis Armstrong's early days, there just isn't any record of it. There are no recordings,
yeah.
there's no transcripts, it just doesn't exist.
And even if you might have recorded it, you might have taped used the same tape and taped over and over and over again. That's
Yeah.
that's possible too. It's because there's also not just the problem of recording it, but also the problem of storing it. It's not like you can put you can put 10,000 songs on a laptop now. It wasn't like that back then.
Well, when Gordon Lightfoot and Bob Dylan got started, there weren't even any tapes. It was
Yeah,
all wax impressions.
yeah. What about reel to reel? Then you have reel to reel tapes back then.
I'm not certain exactly when Bob Dylan got started. I don't know when reel to reel got going. I mean, it may have preceded Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
I'm not positive on that.
Well, yeah, there was a time, when you had, and you literally had to, put the tape on the reel and cue it up. And and of course I can remember, where you'd have to you'd have a tape and you'd want to find a song on the tape and you have to kind of, guess where the song started. Same thing with a vinyl record. That's one thing CDs now did. Okay, CD, go to song number 5, go to song number 6. It just goes right to it. It's really changed a lot. I don't know how. Yeah, there was a lot more. Certainly, the difference between live music and nowadays, I think probably every concert gets recorded nowadays in one form or another, even if it doesn't get marketed.
Oh, probably 20 different ways,
Yeah,
20 different times.
you've got probably you probably got at least yeah, because you've got people on the audience taking their own home bootlegs, and in most cases they're just keeping them for themselves. They're not trying to make any money off of them, but
Yeah, yeah.
they're just going recording the concert and just but yeah, so it's a but you do hear that sometimes too, where people because most of them aren't that good at quality to sell anyway, but you just want to have the memory. It's just the same way you take a photo of something when you go there. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, Sundown is a good one. Also I think Beautiful is also an amazing song. I That just seems to be a, a very romantic song, but not really in a gushing way. Just it's appreciative. I think it celebrates.
In a lot of popular music today, the
Yeah,
romance songs are very one track. They're about somebody being sexy
yeah,
or couple having sex or maybe being really angry. And the magic for me, for Gordon Lightfoot, was in many cases he's just sitting staring out the window thinking about the other person.
yeah,
And you have to infer all the romance and the sex and the arguments because he doesn't talk about any of that. He just talks about the deep feeling of melancholy or happiness or ennui or whatever it is. And then you have to infer that in the entire rest of the world into the song. And I think there's a magic and a mystery to it that gets lost when you drop the bass and then start using explicit lyrics to convey a strong message, which is great, especially when you're dancing. You want that bass to drop and you want to hear really loud noises. And with Gordon Lightfoot, it's more of a delicate experience, kind of like
Yeah.
boating, kind of like taking a rowboat out on the lake and fishing, which I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there was a certain innocence, but I also think they were beating around the bush with a lot of music there. I don't think they wanted to be too explicit, but like,
Well, they'd get censored.
yeah, when you hear a lyric, about in Sundown where you said, "In a room where you do the things you don't confess,"
Hmm.
yeah, and you could throw a lot of different spins on that. Is he? Part of me thinking, is he singing about a prostitute, or is he, or is he
Well, do you
singing
know the
about?
story there?
I'm not really totally sure of what the story is behind Sundown. That was his biggest hit.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was his number one.
Sundown was really, really big for me as a teenager.
Yeah,
And when I was in college, my girlfriend and I loved it, and we would listen to it all the time. And we really internalized a lot of the messages. So eventually, uncovered, I dug up the story behind it. He was dating a woman who was essentially his drug dealer. She
oh,
was she was a groupie, and she liked to get in with musicians. And one of her ins was she always had what you wanted or needed.
yeah,
And so she dated a lot of different rock stars. And she was dating Gordon Lightfoot and basically using him as a placeholder, I want to say. I don't know exactly what was going on, but she was stepping out. She would go to the bar without him, she would go do stuff without him. And one day she's down at the bar and he's at home just fuming. And so he writes this song while she's out, and he thinks she's cheating on him and he's going to break up with her. And I believe he's broken up with her several times. Either she's broken up with him or he's broken up with her, and they've split up several times and they're back together. And after he broke up with her for the last time, she became notorious a few years later because she dated John Belushi and provided
yes,
the heroin that killed him and encouraged him to do more and more often, do more drugs more often. And eventually, she ended up going to jail and spent several years in jail because of John Belushi's death. And that song has, is prophetic because Gordon Lightfoot is singing about doing heroin, he's singing about doing drugs, and then he's singing about how this woman is dangerous and how you need to stay away from her. And there's one line in there that I believe is explicitly about his heroin use. It's like, and it seems like a sin when you get. Oh wait, no. It seems like a shame when I get feeling better because I'm feeling no pain. And when you first
yeah,
start taking heroin, it's supposed to make you feel good,
yeah,
and later you're in pain and you need it to just get the pain to go away.
yeah. Hmm.
And so he wrote this prophetic song about how this woman's dangerous and you need to stay away from her. And then she kills John Belushi.
Isn't it weird because I've known that song probably as long as I can remember, and yet I never realized it was, as a little kid you don't realize this song's about what this song is about. You just,
Well, you couldn't. In a lot of cases, they would
yeah,
not allow that out
yeah,
there. One of my favorite story about this is from Louis Armstrong, how he would go back and forth with the studios, and his song Snakebite only got produced because the producers didn't know it was about smoking pot until after it had been released. And at that point, there was no way they could stop it. And it wasn't that the recording industry didn't want that stuff out there. They would get boycotted. They would have their business ruined if it got out that they were singing about cocaine or drugs or something.
yeah,
Like Bing Crosby, I Get a Kick Out of You. The original version of that has a lot of references to cocaine in there about how I don't do cocaine, it's too boring. I get a kick out of you. And they had to change that to champagne because you can't talk about cocaine, but it's okay to talk about alcohol. And it
yeah,
wasn't
of
until the
course.
70s that you were really late 60s, early 70s that you could really get away from that.
Yeah, it definitely got more explicit. It's very interesting. Yeah, I think, a little kid, you hear a song like Sundown, and you might think it's just about sunsets or something like that. It's, I mean, of course, yeah, it's a But there
Well,
was,
censorship is a very interesting topic because in many cases it just keeps you from expressing yourself at all. And then in some cases it actually enhances your final product. When you have to work around certain rules, it makes you get more creative. Like with the song Snakebite. I mean, I love that song, and
yeah,
I think knowing that there is a deeper meaning to it makes it a more interesting song. And today, with no censorship at all, you get people who will just put everything out there and say what they're saying. And then there are still people who want to layer different meanings on top of each other until the true meaning is completely censored and obscured. So it's a fascinating topic. I prefer self censorship to state
yeah,
censorship personally.
Gordon's or executive censorship. I think, I think maybe Gordon. Yeah, and sometimes I think these people are afraid to really open up about what they, they want to beat around the bush and not say, yeah, you want to imply that you don't want to come out and say I'm an addict. You want to come out, you kind of dance around the fact that you are an addict.
Well,
It, it's
that's
it's
part of
without it's not a full confession of really fulling it. It's not taking full ownership of the. It's almost as if you don't want to take ownership of being. You don't want to completely admit that you're an addict. So you kind of dance around the fact that you are an addict or that you have a problem. So in a way, that's a type of self censorship too. It's because it seems like, and I don't know if that's an issue. It seems like I'm not. I don't know if Gordon would be described as a tortured soul, but you kind of get that impression that maybe he was.
well, every soul goes through some torture,
Yeah.
and being honest about it can sometimes get you labeled.
And the other thing too is that's, even though I was a kid growing up in the '70s and really, my dad loved Gordon Lightfoot, and I guess that's what really hit me is this was something that dad, these were songs. Maybe I didn't appreciate it now, but I appreciate it now more because dad's gone. Those were songs that dad and I loved equally, and you know. I mean, I never went to a concert or anything with my dad, but if I'd have been cool to have went to go see Gordon Lightfoot with dad. I think we would
Oh,
both,
that would have been fantastic. Yes,
you,
having a connection with somebody you love makes the
yeah.
music even better.
I don't, because again, dad was born in 1931. I think I imagine I imagine he probably had a lot of older fans because there wasn't really anything threatening about him. He was pretty soft. He was never really a hard rocker. He was, a folk rock, more of a soft rocker. You know, I, in a way, I can really I think he's probably just a Canadian version of Johnny Cash.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really compare one artist to another. He and Johnny Cash had a lot in common, just like Bob Dylan and Dan Fogelberg,
Yeah,
and so many other singers who never made it quite as big as that. Some of the best always end up on the B team list for some reason.
yeah. Some of the ones we like, yeah. I mean, it's different people, different like. It's I don't know if he got pushed because I don't know if he wasn't really flamboyant or putting on a lot of crazy outfits or anything like that. I mean, if I can imagine he probably didn't do a lot of crazy theatrics at a show. He probably just was pretty. He probably just went up there and sung, and that's fine. That's why you're there. It's I don't need anything else. He just had a really good voice, and he
I just saw a news story yesterday about performance amnesia,
yeah,
where concert goers will go to a show and then immediately after the show, they can't remember anything that happened. And this was in reference to a Taylor Swift concert. And I get the impression that when you put on an ensemble show where you have visuals and then you have the music, but then you have everything so heavily produced, it's like you're walking into some kind of cult initiation.
yeah,
And when it's over, you literally can't remember it anymore because it was just so intense and absorbed you on every level. And with Gordon Lightfoot, that's not what he was about. He wanted to sit down and have a conversation with you, and he spoke with singing.
yeah.
And so you definitely remembered everything. interesting about a Gordon Lightfoot show. But if you go to a Taylor Swift concert, maybe you love every second of it, and tomorrow you can't remember any of it.
I can't analyze because I don't really remember. I haven't been anything with that much theatrics. They've been pretty basic, concerts. It's yeah, I was yeah, certainly. And he had his instrument work was pretty good. He played the guitar and just but his singing, I think I'd been interesting to hear what Gordon could have done just a cappella. That would have been good because he had that good a voice.
He did. He had a very good voice.
Yeah. And and of course, well, I think we've said enough about Gordon. A few weeks later, we of course lost Tina Turner. Well, I don't know how that impacted you or what you felt about that, but that was pretty big
I
too.
liked her. I was never touched by her music the same way Gordon Lightfoot
Oh yeah,
touched me. I liked her. She was an amazing performer. Every time I heard her songs on the radio, I remember enjoying and perking up when I would hear Tina Turner on the radio. That was always great. It just it wasn't the same resonance for me as Gordon
oh
Lightfoot.
yeah, yeah. I don't think it was either. I remember, 1984. What's love got to do with it? And that is by far her masterpiece, in my opinion. I mean,
Oh yes,
it
that
really
got more
there's
spread than anything else.
it definitely has it has a good sound to it. It has a good it's very memorable. It has a lot of good hooks in it. Uh, and what's remarkable about Tina though is the way that she reinvented herself. Uh, after you know and reinvented herself and really had had the peak of her popularity at a time when she on paper should have been considered a has been
Hmm.
and got a new generation of fans. I can remember one girl who was really beautiful, and then I swear, I think she did. I think she was. This was in the eighth grade. She did her hair like Tina Turner. I'm like, oh my goodness, because she always had beautiful hair, and I'm just wondering why did you do this? It just doesn't because it didn't fit with her. But I can understand. I call it the private dancer hairdo, and I
Uh huh.
but she appealed to this new generation of fans who in many cases their mom and dads thought that music was cool 25 years earlier. That doesn't happen very often, and really she was more popular in the 80s than she ever was.
Yes, she really did have the ability to reinvent herself. She wasn't a one trick pony.
Oh
She
yeah,
was an entertainer, she was a musician, and she had the talent and versatility to make it pretty much anywhere she went. And in her personal life, she overcame so many trials. I mean, she was tough. She was
yeah.
tough. She was beautiful. She had an amazing range of talents, and we really lost something special when she passed.
I saw a clip of Dick Cavett, and this was must have been the late 60s or it was up to 70, where and he asked Janis Joplin, "Who's your favorite singer?" And she said Tina Turner. And I'm like, wow, it's a and it was really just the liveliness and the energy that she brought to her show, and she still managed to keep that up. Even and what's interesting too is I'm amazed at how many guys younger than I am who thought, oh, she's so hot. It's like you're looking at her that way, and she's 25 years older than you. It doesn't
Hmm.
happen very often with guys that they're seeing that, but she really. But I think she did go out and have a presence, and she didn't. What was really wild is she didn't really try to make herself look younger than she was. She didn't. I mean, if you look closely, you realize, yeah, she is, in her 40s or 50s, but she just kind of accepted that and did her best with that. She didn't,
Oh,
so
I don't know that she. I mean, she was definitely aware of her appearance.
yeah,
I don't get the impression that she considered that to be part of her look. I
yeah.
think she was so focused on her music and on her performance that her appearance was a necessary element of the production. It wasn't something that was like the centerpiece. She was there for her music, and everything else was secondary. So she didn't have to put on crazy costumes or outfits. And sometimes she did,
Yeah.
absolutely. I don't feel like she was using those as a crutch or as a way to draw in a bigger audience. People were coming for Tina Turner, and they weren't coming to see some outlandish, shocking outfit that would
Yeah.
surprise everybody and end up on the 6 o'clock news. It wasn't like with Lady Gaga, who made a career out of going over the top and then going over the top again. And there were a lot of people who just wanted to follow along to see how she was going to top the last thing she did. And the way Tina Turner topped herself was with musical accomplishment.
Yeah.
And people would go to Tina Turner concerts to watch her top herself again musically.
Yeah.
And she did that consistently, and she reinvented herself, and she delivered to her fans a deep, emotionally satisfying experience that didn't have a whole bunch of unnecessary visuals getting in the way.
Yeah. And the sad part is Lady Gaga didn't have to do that.
Oh, she's enormously
Yeah,
talented.
she's got a great voice. I mean, and
Oh,
Lady Gaga could probably do opera. I mean, some of these women who have great, to the certain same extent too. I don't think Madonna ever had to do that. Uh,
no, but with Madonna and
yeah,
Lady Gaga, they were creating a new form of
yeah,
musical experience where it was much more integrated,
yeah,
and you wanted the shocking, over the top production where it's almost,
yeah,
you're not actually at a concert, you're in a musical,
yeah,
and it's actually a play that's going on.
yeah, yeah.
And
That's yeah,
there's a fine line between when a musical bleeds over into a concert, or a concert can bleed over into a musical these days. I mean, you really
and
can just put it on as a play almost.
yeah, and of course Madonna came on the scene in the era of MTV as well, when they
Yes.
actually played videos, and that was when people at least cared about videos. It was kind of weird how all that happened, but yes. So I don't know where you go from here, but yeah. And you look back at Tina's early days; she was still very, you know, I do wonder, as horror and as much issues as Ike Turner had, does Tina become a star at all if Ike doesn't give her the microphone? It's
That's an interesting question. I'd like
it
to think
really
that
is.
she would, but who knows?
I mean, he was about he was older and had a band going for about 10 years, and then he suddenly realized, okay, and then people didn't pay any attention to him until he gave the microphone to Tina. But he realized he realized she was out there, and of course, he handled a lot of the business. You
Well,
know,
I don't know enough about her to do more than
yeah,
speculate.
yeah,
It is possible that she was too good to be a megastar without somebody producing her
yeah,
and bringing her down to a more popularly accessible level. She
yeah,
might have just been the musician's musician had it not been for Ike. And maybe that would have been better. Maybe it would have been worse. You never know. Because many of these consummate musicians who are amazing and produce technical feats of music don't really seem to want the public eye. I
yeah,
remember Pearl Jam, after one of their albums, one of the one of the members of the band complained that they were too popular, and the complaint was, we used to get feedback from our fans where our fans would say, we really loved this and we really didn't like that. And when they reached a certain level of popularity, they stopped getting the creative feedback from their audience. And I would say that there are a lot of artists who don't want to cross that line into mega stardom
yeah,
because they love that interplay between the audience and the performer. And once you become a megastar and you're playing to sold out 50,000 member crowds, it's a lot harder to get that kind of an intimate connection with your fans.
yeah. And not to mention, you attract a lot more weirdos. I think every musician and artist wants at least to be able to make a living at it. But
Yeah.
even the artists who just make a living, uh, you know, most of them don't become famous. And of course, now with the internet, you can be a studio musician or something like that and make a living and never do shows. It's
Mhm.
it's gotten very interesting how that works. I
Oh
and
yes,
so
the way the world is changing is just breathtaking and unexpected.
yeah, and I do and I do think it sometimes helps when you have a woman like Tina out there. You have the women want to be like her, and the men want to get at least want to fantasize about her. It's
Hmm.
That's what you have in the audience. And I mean, when Motley Crue recruited Vince Neil to sing, they said, yeah, but they said, look at how the women respond to him. It's it's like, okay, that's our lead singer. It's
Well, there's an art to it. Just how much do you want to give in to the things that aren't music?
yeah,
How
yeah,
much do you want to lean on the sex appeal?
yeah. No, well, I don't know. I don't know if you're ever going to separate that from music. To
So
a certain
music is just
extent.
an abstract form of presenting life.
Yeah,
And what part of life are you interested in? Well, if you're a teenager in your early 20s, chances are sex and violence are going to dominate your primary interests. And so you're going to gravitate towards music that fulfills what you're looking for.
yeah. There's definitely something about love and all those things because I think music just create, and I think, and of course, love and sex inspires so much music too. It's a
Hmm.
the
Lots of
spiritual,
drama.
yeah. Whether it be good or bad. The only criticism I have of some of the early stuff is it seemed like Ike and Tina did a lot of covers, and I never really liked their covers that well. But when they did stuff that was more original with them, it was better. But yeah, so
It's more
yeah,
personal that way, I think.
yeah, yeah. It always seems more personal that way. Yeah, I wonder. Uh, I pose the inevitable question: what would Gordon and Tina sound like in a duet? And I don't. It's really making me wonder how that would sound. I still don't know
Oh,
how.
I bet it would be good. I
You know,
bet it would be fantastic if you could get them
yeah,
onto the same page where
yeah,
they're attempting to express the same general ideas in a similar way. I think
yeah.
that would have been an amazing show to see.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a fun thought experiment to have,
Hmm.
with the two of them. I it's certainly yeah. They really a lot of people loved them. It's an interesting fact about Tina too is she's a probably one of the more famous Americans who eventually renounced her citizenship. She married a German record company guy who was like also looks like he was at least substantially younger than she was, and moved to Switzerland and finished out her life there.
Hmm.
I suppose it might have had something to do with the taxes. It sounds like she learned how to manage her affairs pretty well.
I'm not sure how much truth there is to this. I want to believe it because it does sound like the best version of the story. Tina Turner said herself that she was big in America. She was never the biggest. Madonna always surpassed her.
Yeah,
And when she went to Europe, she was the biggest. She went there, and the Europeans loved her. America loved her, Europe loved her more. And so, what are you going to do? These people love me more. I'm going to go hang out with them. And then you're spending all your time over there because your shows always sell out. Everyone's so appreciative and they're constantly gushing over you. And then you come back home and everyone's like, oh, it's Tina Turner.
yeah,
Okay, no, I'm going to go back where these people are just wild over me.
you know,
So
yeah,
I like
that
that
makes
story.
sense. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, and you also have a more densely populated country, so you can do a lot more shows and in a smaller area.
You don't have to travel as much. Yes.
Well, if you do travel, if you are traveling, but your trips in between cities are 2 hours instead of 6 hours. I mean, yeah, and because usually when you're doing musical tours, you usually have to go on the road because you're hauling all this stuff with you. But you just take your bus and go on the road, but you got to do all these different countries, and it's interesting too because I wonder would English be as widely spoken around the world if not for rock music? It probably wouldn't be.
It wouldn't be as pervasive. It would still be out there.
Yeah,
The cultural side, I think, is what's transforming the world, though. It's the music, the movies, the television, all of that is really driving the social change in the world now. I mean, every culture has its influence.
Yeah.
The internet culture, though, is dominated by English, and that's pushing a lot of English language material.
Yeah. And I think Tina was very much a. I didn't really hear Tina complain much. I mean, obviously, she got into a relationship that was very abusive and was in that for a long time, but she got out of it. And then once she got out of it, she just moved on and lived her life.
Hmm.
I didn't see her engaging in much activism. I didn't see her complaining much. I think she just went out and did it and made music that made people happy and still had a good voice and still sold things out. It's a. I had a Facebook friend said, yeah, she's not. She says she's too hot for. She's going to hell because she's too hot for heaven. It's like, yeah. So I don't know. Yeah. So it's good. It's definitely good to think about that, though. I'm glad she. I I don't know how she would rank among all time women, but certainly there's some women out there who did some amazing things in music. And interesting, in a lot of ways, there's a lot of parallels between Tina and Cher, I believe, too.
Yeah, Cher had her own thing. She was more
Yeah,
of an all-around performer than a singer. Singing was part of Cher's talent stack,
yeah,
and so yeah, there's definitely some overlap there, especially in
yeah.
the sex appeal
And
end of
also,
things.
also very young, being discovered by a guy who was maybe 8 or 9 years older, and really starting as part of a duo, and then going her own way. She did that at a younger age too, and I wonder if Cher's success maybe partially inspired Tina's success, because Cher went solo before Tina did, even though they.
Well, my impression is that Cher did not have the technical range of Tina
Yeah.
Turner. Her voice wasn't as good. She's great. She's a
Oh yeah.
fantastic artist. Tina Turner is head and shoulders above
Yeah.
most performers. And I believe that when Cher and Sonny split up, I think that actually hurt Cher's career more than it lets on.
I don't think that's the case at all. It just seems like she took off more after that with some of her songs,
Oh,
and
she got
not to
really
mention,
good.
and
And they
they're
made a
both,
lot of money.
and of course Cher got into acting too. It'd have been interesting to see what Tina could have done with acting. And of course both women were basically ageless.
Hmm.
I mean, Cher had Cher had a number one song in the '90s. It was really just, she never. That was another woman who, and of course she's still alive, but really appealed to another generation, and just maybe even two more generations after her original generation. But yes, it's a. Yeah, yeah. Well, we've talked about two deaths. I don't know if we have much to say about Pat Robertson at this point, but Pat Robertson died this week too. It's a.
I can tell you everything I've ever really thought or cared about him in less than 2 words.
What?
Nothing.
Nothing yet. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything.
Never considered him relevant in my life. I became aware of him in the 80s when I was
Yeah,
a child, and he was just this odd curiosity. It's like, why would somebody want to go to church? All right, and that's it.
I'm understanding more and more. I'm starting to understand that because they need something to believe in, and if you don't have something to believe in, it really does. There really is kind of there really is an empty feeling. It's interesting how it seems to be coming around more now that people have this empty feeling of not knowing where to go or what to do or why they're looking for a why. Why are we
Yeah,
here? Why do we exist? Why do we do these things we do? It's. I
if
mean,
you have
don't
an empty feeling,
you
then
ask
definitely
yourself these
try to fill
questions
it with
during the
something.
last 3 years? Uh, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah, I don't see much point in discussing Pat Robertson too long. No,
yeah,
no,
I
I
wasn't.
was never, never into that scene.
But Pat Robertson harkens back to the days really when the conservatives were the ones who were pushing cancel culture.
Hmm.
They
Well,
wanted to
they still
cancel.
are.
They wanted to
Conservatives
cancel
still
Ozzy
are pushing
Osbourne.
cancel culture.
They wanted to cancel Ozzy Osbourne. They wanted to cancel Bart Simpson. They wanted to cancel Al Bundy. They wanted to cancel,
You
they
want to
wanted
hear an open secret?
what?
Progressives are more conservative than Republicans.
I agree with you in that sense, and you know what, I like this one definition of conservatism, and this person said conservatism is essentially the belief that there should be one group of people whom the law protects but doesn't bind, and one group of people whom the law binds but doesn't protect.
Yes. And the way you decide who those people are is you identify the orthodox beliefs of the culture, and whoever embodies those orthodox beliefs can do no wrong. And the people who protect those people who embody the orthodox beliefs also can do no wrong. So whoever that is, whatever that is in any given generation, that's what you get. That's what the conservatives protect. And right now you have the conservatives split into two groups. You've got traditional conservatives, and then you've got quote unquote progressive conservatives who seem to be pushing more of an ideological agenda than a set of cultural beliefs. And it's an ideological agenda that is kind of a mirror image of the traditional values that we see represented in media.
Yeah, the traditional values represent meaning. Can you elaborate on that a little more, please?
Okay, reel me in if I get too far afield.
Yeah.
Traditional values would be basically the winners of a fight or a war are held up as good people. Whenever there has been a war in the past, everybody lines up behind their side and they have a narrative. And whoever wins becomes much more popular, and their narrative is then retconned into what becomes history. The
Yes.
losers, the losers create a mirror image where it's a countercurrent, like the South will rise again, or the Fourth Reich, or every big loser from a big war. There will be a countercurrent underground. And I believe the progressives represent this underground ideology that has always lost out. And in purely metaphysical terms, I would say this is a battle between the intellect and the emotions, where as a species we create artificial spaces. We create cities, buildings, towns, villages, factories. These are all artificial constructs, and they are created by the intellectual side of the mind. And the emotional, intuitive side of the mind is constantly fighting back against these. And whenever there's any kind of social conflict, whether it's a war or a cancel culture movement or just moving on from one type of music into another type of music, one fashion into a new fashion, whoever loses out in these conflicts, they have an irresistible urge to unravel the intellectual institutions in their mind and return to a more intuitive emotional source. And I believe the Republicans and conservatives in general represent the intellectual institutions of the past, and the progressives represent the people who were defeated by the people who constructed those institutions. And so the Republicans represent the intellect, and the Democrats represent intuition to a degree. And whenever the intellect goes too far, intuition gets the upper hand. And whenever intuition erodes too much of our institutions, then the conservatives come back and reassert the intellect. And we're seeing that right now. Conservatives are making a huge push in the culture right now because it's perceived that the progressive ideology has gone too far. We have devolved too far into our instincts, and we need to rebuild some intellectual constructs. That's the way that I look at it.
What I find interesting about the left nowadays, and really, there seems to be a grievance industry that is constantly looking for grievances.
Well, that's what I'm talking
And
about.
what do you do when these, when it's just all a fantasy, and that's all it is anymore? Uh, it
This
really is at this
grievance
point.
culture you're talking about goes back to the beginning of recorded history and probably back to the beginning of human language, if not even further.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. It's also this dominance of what I would call victim culture that we now give all the attention to the victims and not the people who accomplish things. I mean, feminism hasn't really had
There's a
much of
push
anything.
to give all the attention to the victims. There's a push for it, but that's a real cultural battle. There's a lot
Yeah,
of attention given to people who aren't victims too. And I would say more attention is still given to people who aren't victims than people who are.
I certainly hope that's the case. I mean,
Well, look at it. Look at the Super Bowl.
yeah,
The Super Bowl, sporting competitions, and musical concerts. You don't see people paying money to listen to people who suck at music. Now, some of those singers out there suck, like Bob Dylan. His singing voice is not something that a lot of
well,
people liked, but that's not what his selling point was. Bob Dylan was a winner. And so most of the attention still goes to Tom Brady and Bob Dylan
yeah.
and Madonna and Tina Turner. And Ed Wood,
Well,
for instance, doesn't get all that much attention.
I don't think music and sports are quite the same though, because sports has a more objective measurement of who is good and who is not good.
Well,
Music
they
doesn't.
all they all fit into a cultural
Yeah.
milieu, and the milieu is winners and losers, healthy people, victims, perpetrators, and in sports everything's very binary. In music, it's less binary, but there's still a strong binary. How many dollars
Well,
did were you able to earn last year?
yeah, but but I'm saying there's no necessarily. I'm just saying there's no objective measurement of who is really good or who isn't good. It's not. It's not like if you're playing golf, and one person, always, shoots about, shoots that round in 70, and the other person shoots that round in 90. I
Yeah,
mean,
that,
that's a measurable criteria.
that's why the music industry uses number one hits and
Well,
number of albums sold.
again, that's based on sales, though. That's not an objective criteria of the actual performance of the music. You
It's
know,
a
just
it's a it's a stand-in
just the same.
to
Just
replace.
the same way that just the same way that the golfer who shoots 90 might be more popular with the fans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that is one. Yeah, yeah. It's uh, what and the other thing too though about sports is the only place in the world about anymore where you actually see genuine leadership.
I can see how it's obvious in sports. I would say there's lots of genuine leadership everywhere, and in many cases, it's just in vogue to conceal the leadership because the best leaders actually lead by example and push forward the talent. The best leaders, you don't see the leader because it doesn't look like they're doing anything.
I mean, yes, but though, yes, but the football coach is a leader, or the basketball coach is a leader, and maybe to a certain extent, some of the executives for the teams are leaders, and they're judged at least by whether they win or lose. I mean, I don't see. I I mean, a lot of the places I worked, I just kind of say, don't call them leadership, call them management.
Oh yeah, there's a big push to
Yeah,
that.
and because they're not leaders at all.
Well,
They're
look
just
at Elon Musk. Elon Musk is culturally one of the most influential people out there, and he is seen as a leader and an innovator and a cultural force. And whether you agree with him or not, it's incontrovertible that he has that perspective of being a leader and a winner, not a victim, and he's celebrated by millions.
well, I don't know. I, well, he's an authority and he's a manager. I don't know if he's a leader or not. That's still I'm still
He is
the jury's
perceived
still
as a
out for me.
leader.
I mean, we certainly, and their authorities are, yeah. I mean, certainly it's something where and you're in sports, you're judged as a winner or loser by whether or not by you do win. Getting back to the victim culture thing. Here's a tweet from a Russian Bitcoiner who's in Moscow right now. And she said, there's a lot of sad things about Pride, but in my opinion, the saddest is that they don't realize how much their American privilege is hurting the LGBT community in other countries. Russia and the like will never grant basic human rights after seeing what it lead to in the U.S. Now, her English isn't perfect, but she's basically saying that because the LGBT community in America has went so over the top in America that it's hurting activists in other countries.
I think that's irrelevant. I don't think she's right. And
Maybe not.
that particular track, that's hyperbolic. And
Yeah.
there's no evidence that Russia is never going to grant full franchise to the homosexual population. They've made great strides in the last 40 years. They're still lagging the Western world, so we see them as uh, abhorrent in some cases, the way they're treating vulnerable populations. If you compare the way they're treating gay people today versus how they treated them in 1990, it's a huge improvement. And I see no reason to believe that that trend is going to reverse itself. Well, here's a good reason why. Demographically, Russia's population is in collapse. They
Oh,
cannot
yes.
afford they cannot afford to voluntarily throw anybody out of their culture. They need every gay person, they need every trans identified person, they need every immigrant, honestly, that they can get just to prop up their the their economy and their culture. They're not going to survive if they don't integrate gay people. And people want to survive, so they're going to do what it
I
takes to survive.
I that's a very interesting thing because that's most of Europe though. I mean, it's almost all. I think every country in Europe is basically in a baby bust. I'll have to look it up, but I
Well,
mean,
there's a
under
democratic
two,
line that's
in some
going on
cases
here.
under 1.5.
When we talk, well, in some cases it's below one. I
Yeah,
want to say Austria is at zero point 0.9 or something. China's at zero point 0.7. Italy's below one. I want to say Austria's below one. I don't remember the exact numbers, but they're all bad. There is a problem though when you're talking about demographics. Do you remember Jeremy Bentham's essays?
I know of him. I'm not really that much aware of his essays.
I want to say it was Jeremy Bentham. Let me look him up really quick.
Yeah, I mean,
I believe he wrote. No, no, yes. He wrote an article, an essay called "A Modest Proposal." Have you heard of that?
I think I've heard of that. Yes,
Let's see. Actually, I don't. It might not have been Bentham. I want to get this right before we
modest
talk about it.
proposal. I could look that up too. Yeah,
A Modest Proposal was Jonathan Swift. I don't know where I got Bentham from on that.
yeah, Jonathan Swift.
Jonathan
Yes.
Swift wrote an essay titled "A Modest Proposal," and it was the inverse of what a lot of people are thinking now. A lot of people are afraid that because of China's demographic collapse and because of Europe's demographic collapse and Russia's, that civilization is going to end. Well, in Jonathan Swift's day, they were concerned that the poor and the uneducated were going to outbreed the genteel class and then anarchy was going to reign supreme because the rich people weren't having babies and poor people were having 10.
Yes.
And what I see happening today is actually very encouraging and heartwarming. Right now, you're seeing a baby bust in Western Europe and even in the United States in a lot of ways. We mask that with our immigration, but native born Americans are having almost as few children as Europeans. And there's some concern that Asia and Africa are going to outcompete us by growing more, and I think that's laughably absurd. The birth rates in some countries are higher than in the United States simply because they haven't caught up with us economically and educationally yet. As everyone catches up, then the birth rate's going to fall. But the collapse in the birth rate has nothing to do with anything other than the ability of poor people to limit the number of children that they have. If you
Yes.
only want to have 2 kids, you only have to have 2 kids now. You can only have one. 100 years ago, guess what? You got married, you're going to have kids, and they're just going to keep coming, and you're not going to be able to stop the number of children that come. And
Yes.
now we can actually use birth control to manage that. And I think that's the only thing that's happening. And what that's
Yeah.
doing is it's really getting rid of a lot of human misery. And instead of focusing on the positives, people are decrying the population collapse. Oh, Russia's going to cease to exist. Italy's going to cease to exist. No, no. People are still having kids. They're just not having as many kids. And maybe the populations will decline. Right now, it looks like the population on the planet is going to peak in the next 20 years and then begin a very fast decline for about a century, and then it'll level off somewhere between 2 and 5 billion people.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And as Aaron Clary likes to say, the number one cause of poverty, of course, is people having kids when they can't afford them. It really is interesting, and it's taken a long time, but Homo sapiens have finally figured out how that happens and how not to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Having well,
realization that birth control is actually cheaper and easier than raising kids.
did you know that birth
Wow,
control is not the main reason for the demographic collapse?
what is it?
The demographic collapse began 200 years ago. It started much slower, but the early signs of it were obvious in the early 1800s.
What was it?
Demographically, female fertility is driven by infant mortality. If
That's
you
true. Yes.
overlay if you overlay infant mortality rates and female fertility rates, you'll see a very strong correlation in every
Yeah.
community. And when you look back in time, you see that same correlation. So when you get infant mortality down near zero, then you get female fertility below 2
We
because
have
every
to. We
baby
have
lives.
to. Yeah, we have to have as many kids as we can because half of them are going to die.
Yeah, yeah. Or in some cases, more than half. You have to make
Yeah.
sure that you have at least one that
Oh yeah.
makes it. So you
Yeah.
end up having as many as you can.
Yeah. I mean, really, up until 1950, it was not unusual. Up until around 1950, it was not unusual to lose a child. I mean,
Now,
my,
birth control certainly helped.
yeah, I mean, my
Contraception was
father. I mean,
really
my father had two brothers who, both died before. One died at 10 days. One died at the age of two. That was both of them were in the 1930s. Yeah, it was definitely. I mean, you had epidemics. You had real epidemics. You had lots of things that would, take the kids out. Unfortunately, it was not that unusual at all.
yeah, yeah, and a lot of it was just infant mortality. Birth control has
Yeah.
certainly helped. Contraception has helped. Mostly, though, when your children aren't going to die, everybody knows how to stop babies from coming.
Yeah, the whole birth rate thing, I do wonder also because at the same time, you're now looking at a situation where you may have one kid who's caring for two parents, and that's caring for a parent can be a lot of work. And if you don't, and if you're doing it all by yourself, I can imagine how overwhelming that's going to be. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I
It's
do.
already a problem.
The only thing, I mean, the one thing that might change is we might get to a place where we can at least extend our lives. I'm looking into a lot of things like that that seem like they're going in a positive direction with life extension technologies.
Well, even if we can't extend life, if we can extend health and improve health, then that will also reduce the burden on caregivers and also
Yeah.
increase the productive lifespan because most people don't want to retire, they have to. And if you
Yeah.
get to where you can keep working, many people will.
And that's another thing too, though, is that, well, how many, and when you say these people have to retire, what is the have to retire that some of these people don't want to retire, and some of these people that, and but because somebody says we won't hire you, that's why they're forced to retire. Where do you think America is going to go from here? It seems like there's a lot. I think we're still in a very turbulent time, and there's still a lot of really
Oh, yeah.
interesting things
We're,
that could happen.
we're in a massively turbulent time. From 2010 until 2020, the economic output of the United States increased by 50%.
Yes.
That creates enormous turbulence. And the acceleration is increasing, not decreasing.
Well, we
We're
also,
likely we're
yeah.
likely going to increase our economic output by more than 50% this decade.
Well, I was also saying that that decade was probably the best in world history overall, not just for
Until
America,
this
but the
decade,
world. I mean, until the pandemic hit, and then everybody went crazy and started being stupid and decided to purposely wreck their economies. I
well, a crisis. Sometimes the best thing in the world looks like a crisis. And now I don't want to downplay the horrors that happened during COVID, both from people dying from the disease and from people overreacting to the disease. I believe that economically, in the medium term, COVID is one of the best things that's ever happened to the economy. Medium term.
In what sense?
It forced everybody to upgrade all their IT. It forced everybody to seriously examine their supply chain and shore it up and make it as redundant as possible, make it more efficient, more lean. So every company on the planet that could upgraded their IT and reinforced their supply chains. And now that things are opening up again, they have a much more robust infrastructure than they had going in for the
Yeah,
ones that survived. And the weak ones died. That's great. Weak businesses die, strong businesses grow. That's how it should be.
yeah, yeah. I mean, well, it definitely, that's one thing. There are some businesses that definitely deserve to get put out of business. I think the most visible thing for me that I really find annoying, Ed, is just uh, there was definitely a collapse in customer service. Oh, I'm sorry for the bad service, but ever since the pandemic started, it's like we're all going to give you as crappy, lousy service as possible now, and since we have an excuse, we're going to do it. I will say the businesses that always cared, they still care, but the business that just kind of saw, yes, service, we've heard of that. They went from mediocre to horrible.
Yeah, if you have the suite of Apple products, you still have top-notch customer service.
Yeah,
If you've got AT&T as your phone provider, good luck.
yeah, or Southwest Airlines.
Yeah.
Southwest Airlines is a good example.
Well, the collapse of customer service is just pushing people to be more independent and
Yeah.
resilient too.
But in some things, you still need hotels. You still need one service I pay for. They used to promise maybe a 4 to 6 hour response time on calls, and now it takes 2 days to get a call back from them, and they're just like, oh, I'm sorry. It's like, yeah, it was
Well, well, as yeah,
yeah,
there's always going to be challenges, and what those
yeah,
challenges represent are opportunities.
yeah,
They're opportunities for a good manager, somebody who's got a good background
yeah,
in mid and high level management. It creates an opportunity for them to come in and create a new business model that better services customers. When you do that, you make billions of dollars. And then you just can't hear the envious people who are whining and complaining about billionaires because you just made a killing.
yeah, yeah. It's a yeah, and of course, yeah, it's yeah, yeah, and And the other thing too is all these, we had one major grocery store in town that was open 24/7. It was just one location, but it was nice. We don't have that anymore. Some stores that were open used to be open till some stores that used to be open till maybe midnight or 1 o'clock. They all close at 11 a.m. I hate some of these changes. It just seems so ridiculous what's happened.
It's
Yeah,
been very disruptive for a lot of people,
yeah,
and
and there
in a
was some
lot of
reason.
ways, services declined.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if this is a controlled demolition of the American economy or the world's economy, but it seems like it was. And I unfortunately also had the misfortune of buying a car last fall. That was not fun. My other car purchases were relatively easy.
Hmm.
This was a nightmare. Although I think that's part of a bigger picture too. I think they're trying to get. I think they're trying to get rid of cars. I really do.
Oh, some people want to get rid of cars. The problem with getting cars is the people that want to get rid of cars are actually incompetent. So they're not going to be able to accomplish their goal. They're so incompetent that all they can really do is go beg for money and blame other people for their problems. So I consider the usual suspects in this regard to be a threat on the level of Larry, Curly, and Moe. You really don't want to put them in charge, but as long as you don't put them in charge, everything's going to be fine.
Well, if you're referring to if you're referring to, are you referring to people like Greta Thunberg and
I
clowns
would
like that?
rather not give people free publicity
Okay.
because when you give them free publicity, you're putting them in charge. And I'd rather they not be put in charge.
Well, I think a lot of these World Economic Forum types and others there want to take cars away. I don't know what to say about that. It's
Well,
rather
again, I don't want to give institutions who don't deserve it free advertising or
okay.
power. I will say that I'm fine talking about Greta Thunberg because she is not a leader. She's not in charge of anything. She is a victim. She is a victim of child trafficking, and her parents and the people who enabled her parents belong in prison for child abuse.
Yeah, they.
And she needs care, is what she needs. She needs sympathy, compassion, and care. And instead, they're continuing to perpetuate the abuse on her because she actually believes what she's pushing, and she has been carefully trained in what she's doing, and it happened before she was at the age of consent. She was groomed into being an activist and a fearmonger.
Yeah.
There's no logic, there's no science behind what she's pushing, and it was done to her by her parents and by willing organizations who wanted to take advantage of her. She
You
has
know,
never been to a useful day's labor in her entire life. She's just broken.
I make the comparison a lot to the child star, and I'll tell you what, I've said that Greta will be dead before the age of 40, either by suicide or overdose. That
I
is
hope not.
sad.
I hope she can
Yeah,
get. I hope she can get the care that she needs.
I
And
her best hope is that she meets up with somebody on the other side and becomes friends with them, and then she realizes, hey, these people are okay. These people are nice. I should talk to them. Maybe if I be friends with them, and some of them would probably be nice with her. I like to joke that because she and Kyle Rittenhouse have the exact same birthday, that they should get together. Uh, you know, but and just see what happens there. That's her only hope. And I
I
hope it
feel
works
that
out.
crisis actors are obscuring what's actually going on the planet. They're they they run interference for the reality. I think you probably remember the picture of Boris Yeltsin in Texas. Do you
No,
remember his visit to Texas when he was
Boris Yeltsin in Texas. I don't remember this.
okay? In the 1980s, Boris Yeltsin came to the United States, and during the summit, he decided to take an unplanned detour and had his driver turn right and let's go to a grocery store, because he wanted to see what America was really like without the Potemkin villages, because he knew America was using Potemkin villages just like he was using Potemkin villages. And he wanted to see how the American people actually lived. And so he broke off of his assigned route and just went off in a random direction with his little entourage and said, I'd like to go to a grocery store. So his minders are like, okay. And they take him into a random grocery store, and he just sees that it's overflowing with food. And when he left that site, he was talking to other people, and he said, if the Russian people see this, they will kill us. Because he realized that the Americans weren't doing a Potemkin village on him. We were literally just showing the world what we actually have. And what Greta Thunberg and other crisis actors are doing is they're attempting to make the world look much worse than it really is in order to gain power. The world increased its productive capacity by 50% in the last decade. The next decade, it's going to increase even faster. Poor people are getting rich at a faster rate than at any point in history. Clean energy is moving forward very fast. And between nuclear and solar, we're going to replace fossil fuels sometime in the next 50 years. It's probably going to take 50, maybe even 70 years, but we're going to do it. The future is turning the entire planet into the equivalent of the Garden of Eden. We're
The what?
restoring the oceans. Hmm?
The garden image you said?
The Garden of Eden.
Okay.
You know, the paradise that they talk about at the
Yes.
beginning of the Bible and that will happen to the earth when Jesus comes again. Well, I
Yes.
don't think Jesus is returning. I do think we are going to turn the planet into the Garden of Eden. And we're already well down that road. The only problem is people like to fight. They like to be negative. They like to be pessimistic. And they like to use undue influence on each other. So we have crisis actors, many of them former politicians, Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Greens, Labor, Tories. Wherever you go, there's names for them. And I would say most of those politicians are all crisis actors. They're attempting to scare the people in order to get power. And the
Yes.
reality is, we've never had it better, and the future is brighter than it's ever been.
Well, you're probably aware of the H.L. Mencken quote where he says, "The whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed, and hence clamorous to be led to safety by an endless series of hobgoblins, most of them imaginary."
Yeah, most, if not all. That reminds me of one of my favorite Mark Twain quotes. I've experienced thousands of tragedies in my life, and a few of them actually happened. Most of it
That's
was just imaginings in his head. And there are real tragedies that do happen in life. And I don't want to come across as a Pollyanna who thinks that everything's perfect and nothing bad ever happens. Lots of horrible things happen. Lots of
yeah.
tragedies happen all the time.
Well, it's sort of like what Jim Stockdale said, when he was in the prison camp. He said, who did the worst? He said the optimists, because it just crushed their fantasies. I mean, he said, you have to be confident that things are going to work out, but you also have to be aware of your situation.
Definitely. And if you have awareness of your situation and you work
Yeah.
hard, then there are plenty of reasons for optimism, because we're not in a prison camp. We are in a prison camp with golden chains and golden beds, if we see it that way. But if you want to do something with your life, there are unprecedented opportunities for you to succeed today, more so than at any other point in history.
Yes, I. What one of the interesting things too is the economic growth. Do you think we're going to see real prosperity from all this, or is it just going to stay in the hands of the few? And are they just
When has it ever stayed in the hands of the few?
Well, I mean, that was what COVID was all about. It was about, it was a wealth transfer scheme, or at least
Well, that's what government always does. Government is always a wealth transfer scheme. And they did manage to grab a whole lot.
yeah,
But in order, well, see, there's this concept that I like to talk about called the glass pyramid. The more wealth you have, the more people you need to take care of your wealth.
true.
So, so if you're at the top and you confiscate $100 billion for yourself, you now have to hire hundreds of people to manage it. And if you don't pay them well, if you don't take care of them, they're going to steal your stuff or break it or both. The wealthier the planet gets, no matter how evil and greedy the people on top may be, the more wealthy the planet gets, the better they have to take care of their people who are taking care of their stuff, or their stuff is just going to get broken. For instance, smartphones.
Yeah,
There we go. There's the camera. There's my smartphone. You cannot make smartphones in a totalitarian regime. It doesn't work. You need a lot of independent, hardworking actors in order to pull off all the miracles necessary to make an iPhone. China can't do it, Russia can't do it, Iran can't do it, Venezuela will never be able to do it. None of these countries can do it. It can only be done in a reasonably free marketplace. And the wealth that we're generating today isn't brick and mortar wealth. It's not more food, it's not more gold, it's not more things made of iron. A lot of the wealth that we're creating today is very delicate and very expensive and very, very hard to make. And in order for the wealth to continue to accumulate, the people have to continually be treated better and better and better. And as populations decline, the wages of the poorest people will rise simply by supply and demand. You can use all the crisis actors and politicians you want. If wealth continues to rise and the population continues and the population begins to fall, then wages will rise and they will rise very fast.
I think that could also tie in with the lower birth rates. If you literally could be get into a situation where, oh, we got into the forced retirement angle. I think people are going to keep older people on because they have to have. We'd rather have this 75-year-old guy than have nobody. So
Exactly, exactly. And they'll have to pay the 75-year-old guy. And they're going to have to make accommodations for him because of his incontinence. And his home health nurse is going to show up to the office. And you're going to have an 84-year-old guy who's got Alzheimer's and an AI assistant that knows how to nudge him to keep him on track. And he's going to be making $350,000 a year and getting good performance reviews and enjoying himself. He's not going to be some horror slave who just wants to be left alone. He's actually going to be loving his job, even though he's got dementia or Alzheimer's, and he's got a home health nurse wiping his butt for him, and he's going to be making $350,000, $400,000 a year, and loving his job and his life. And his employer is going to have to make enormous accommodations just to be able to keep him working because he's going to be such a fragile, decrepit old dodger, and he's still going to be making oodles and oodles of money and enjoying himself. I think that's a likely scenario. I'm being a little bit hyperbolic, but
yeah,
I expect to see much more accommodations made in the workplace for people with disability or age-related degeneration.
possibly, where do you think AI, artificial intelligence, is going to fit into all this?
Well, I hope we get a general AI and transform the entire planet with super intelligence. That would be great. Right now, that's still a science fiction story. So, if we want to talk about transformer technology, which is very different from AI, even though it's put under the same umbrella, ChatGPT is a transformer program. All it really is a form of autocorrect and word prediction. And very soon, we're going to have a synthetic assistant that comes out. synthetic teachers, synthetic assistants, synthetic therapists, synthetic best friends, synthetic girlfriends. All of these things are going to come out. And what they're going to do is, first off, for children who love learning and children who don't love learning, these synthetic assistants are going to be tailor made for the children to make sure that they learn all the things that they need to succeed. And they're going to need to learn how to manage their emotions. They're going to need to learn how to articulate themselves and communicate with other people and be productive and creative and happy. And as soon as these transformer assistants hit the market, you're going to see a revolution in pedagogy. You're going to see collapses in public school and even private school networks as more and more families do homeschooling, because if you have a transformer that becomes your child's friend and your child actually likes the transformer, that transformer is not just going to be the school teacher, it's also going to be a babysitter and a playmate. And then you're going to have children who are routinely graduating from high school, having high school level educations by the time they're 10, 11, 12 years old. And that's what AI is going to do. AI is going to radically boost human flourishing by teaching people not to be idiots. I mean, one of the biggest complaints that I hear is like, I go outside and there's just a bunch of idiots out there. They're just causing trouble everywhere. The world's going to hell in a handbasket. A transformer is going to be able to not only educate children, it's also going to be able to identify psychopaths and people with special needs that are not currently being met. And then those needs will be more likely to be met. We'll have fewer people going to prison. We'll have more productive members of society. And it'll just be an upward spiral of productivity, wealth, and prosperity. And there will be tragedies happening all the time. There will still be criminals. There will be murder. There will be abuse. There will be neglect. There will be all sorts of horrible things. Those things are still happening, and they will continue to happen. They will happen less frequently, and they will happen to fewer people.
Well,
And go
how
ahead.
does that
Myself.
how does that jibe with what it's being been what the primitive versions of artificial intelligence have been used for right now? Because right now it's being used for censorship. It's being used to monitor people and control their lives. I mean, I suppose they'll use it to plan genocides and things like that. I'm just wondering what other kind of nefarious purposes they're going to use it for. Because
Well, when we first harnessed fire, we used it to burn down the forest.
Or used it to burn people.
Yep, still gets used to burn people sometimes.
Well, it's still, yeah, but it also you make to heat things.
Advances in technology are indistinguishable from weapons, and when they're used badly, horrific results can happen. Now, the advantage is the nefarious people who want to use AI to plan genocide have to go up against people who are constructive, who want to use AI to stop genocide and to stop censorship. You know, censorship doesn't exist anymore. You know that, don't you?
What'd you say?
Censorship does not exist anymore.
In what sense?
In the sense that if I want to communicate with people who want to listen to me, it happens. If they want to listen to me, it happens, period. And that's been possible since even the 90s, thanks to encrypted email. Now, you can censor platforms, but you can't censor people. And if you want to censor somebody, you're going to have to actually show up to their house, remove their internet, remove their ability to have money, and move around. You're basically going to have to throw them in jail. And even then, it's going to be hard to censor them, because there have been prisoners in the past who were thrown into jail, and they would write out their little manifestos on toilet paper and smuggle them out, and then they would get published. The fastest way, like, look at what happened to Tucker Carlson. I am not a fan of Tucker Carlson. I do not like the guy. I don't know enough about him to tell you why I don't like him. It's just whenever I turn on his show and I watch him, I get bored or I get annoyed. So I just don't watch him. He lost his job at Fox the other day, and then he went to Twitter, and he went from having a show with 4 million viewers to every time he drops a video now, he gets like 90 million imprints. That's not censorship. That's amplification. They tried to censor Jordan Peterson. Nobody knows who Jordan Peterson is. He certainly doesn't have any career anymore. His practice in Canada as a psychologist, it looks like it's over. He's being sued by dozens of people. Nobody wants to be like Jordan Peterson. Nobody listens to him. No, when he wants to get a message out, nobody hears him either. Censorship does not exist anymore, not in any appreciable way. And AI is not going to make that easier. It's making it harder. For one thing, as soon as you can deep fake everybody, you can actually screw up big time and say, oh, that was just a deep fake. You've got plausible deniability for everything. Sure, I can make Queen Elizabeth II, I can insert her credibly into some porno. Yeah, but by that same token, when King Charles says something really stupid, his agents can say, oh, that wasn't him. That was a deep fake from somebody who hates the royals. So we're getting more freedom, not less. And AI is not going to make it easier to censor people.
Well, that's a very optimistic viewpoint. I always do know that you have the remarkable and uncanny ability to zoom out and see things that aren't always obvious if you're looking too closely.
From one perspective, it's a really pessimistic viewpoint because there are a lot of people who really should be censored, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. I mean, there's this guy Andrew Tate. I've never watched more than 30 seconds of him. I can't stand the guy, and if anybody's a poster child for censorship, it's him, and he can't get shut down. That's kind of a dystopic thing, though.
I don't. Well, yeah, and you said you didn't want to give these people power, but you're talking about him.
He's a worm. He has no power, and he's never going to have power. He's not trying to take over the world. He just wants to get laid and own a couple of Ferraris.
I don't know what the deal is. I'm amazed at how many people out there are just grifting anymore.
Oh yeah. Well, see, grifting is an inevitable consequence of prosperity. You can only grift when there's plenty of extra.
True.
And the more extra you get, the more grifters we're going to get. And that's the pessimistic side for all the prosperity.
The whole point is our society could not afford to maintain these kind of grifters 300 years ago.
No, one of the reasons why COVID was such a health concern was because the people who were most vulnerable to it would have died long before COVID 100 years ago. We protect so many people with such fragile health today that COVID could actually cause serious trouble.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like this graphic. It says, which way to go? Which way, insecure Western male? It says, Jordan Peterson, mommy issues, Andrew Tate, daddy issues. I don't know if either's true.
Yeah, those kinds of memes are funny. If you need a distraction from work or stress, then memes are it. See, like memes. Look at memes. When we were kids, when I was a kid, I had to wait all week for my memes. And then I only got 15 or 20 of them, and I didn't get to select because there were only 20 or 30 comics in the Sunday paper. I had to wait all week for memes, and now I've got an unlimited supply.
We remember I was a teenager during the heydays of when Bloom County was at its peak. The greatest comic strip of all time.
Farside, all that stuff.
Oh, Bloom County, Doonesbury was Doonesbury I think was already past its prime, but anyway.
Yes.
There is some truth. A good comic strip doesn't last more than probably 10 years. Well, I'll admit that. I think Garfield's still funny as hell.
Bloom County is still going. You know that, right?
It's not like it used to be though.
It's not as good as it was.
It's not as good.
He tried to retire in 2000. That was
Well
20.
he initially retired like in '90, and he said he didn't think he could maintain the level of quality, and then he went and did all this other stuff, and he went back to the original. But yeah, it was I don't know if you can recapture the chemistry, and it's funny. I don't ever remember Peanuts being funny. It might have been funny in the '50s, I guess.
It had a certain magic, and then once it was going, it was just a perpetual motion machine where he could write anything, and people
Yeah,
just wanted
yeah.
it because
I
it was
think
comfortable.
I think probably in the '50s it actually portrayed kids in a way that it wasn't that had never really been portrayed anywhere else.
Mm.
It might have been the closest thing to South Park in the 1950s.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't heard it compared that way, but that
Well,
makes sense.
that's my comparison, but I'm just thinking, they didn't portray kids as necessarily, I mean, you had Lucy who was always crabby, and you had, it kind of portrayed kids with a realism and that you didn't always see, say, in
Oh,
sitcoms.
Pigpen. You
Yeah,
have a
Pigpen.
child in every classroom had a child who had really horrible hygiene and was dirty, and today a teacher wouldn't allow that child into the room.
Yeah, yeah. So,
That was
I
pretty
don't
good.
know where. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where AI goes. Where do you think the world's going to go in the next 10 years? You seem to have a forecast of where it's going to go. What about where's cryptocurrency in all of this? Where's Bitcoin?
Crypto is incubating in the developing world.
Yes.
And as inflation continues to soar, I mean, Argentina is 109%, Venezuela's over 400%, Syria, Turkey, Iran, Sudan, you have horrible inflation all over the world. Places like this are adopting cryptocurrency, and it's not being put on the news because poor people using cryptocurrency to buy milk and diapers isn't newsworthy. Poor people dying is newsworthy. But when poor people are using cryptocurrency to circumvent a failed currency, that's just not newsworthy, and politicians don't want to hear it either. Cryptocurrency is making inroads around the world. And when I say cryptocurrency, I'm talking about Bitcoin and Ether primarily, and their primary derivatives. I don't know as much about the rest of the altcoins. Most of them are probably just thinly veiled scams. There are plenty of good coins out there. I just don't know which ones are which. So I just focus on the big stuff. And the big stuff is making inroads everywhere. It's probably going to triple or sextuple over the next 10 years. And at some point, it's going to take down a major economy. It's hard to predict. It could happen next year. It might not happen for 20 years. But I expect Bitcoin to topple Argentina, Venezuela, Lebanon, something like that. It's probably going to be a small country, so it's probably not going to be Argentina. It could be Lebanon. Bitcoin
El
could take over
Salvador.
Lebanon. El
El
Salvador has
Salvador.
already adopted it. And if
Yes.
El Salvador does manage it properly, then El Salvador could become the archetype for
I
transition to a digital economy.
for good and bad, Bukele seems like he's some later version of Pinochet. He definitely seems like he's a capitalist, which I think could be very good for El Salvador. But I don't like the fact that he rounded up all these people and put them in jail like just in a clean sweep. He probably got a lot of people who weren't really guilty of anything.
So, do you know what's happening in Chile right now?
In Chile right now,
Yeah, the country of Chile.
not really sure.
Okay, well, Argentina is a mess. Inflation's 109%, and those two countries just kind of parallel each other. In Chile right now, they elected a far left progressive socialist president a year or so ago, and they
Yes.
decided to write a new constitution.
Yes, I know.
Do you know about the committee for that constitution?
I know they're going to have a new constitution. Yes.
Yeah, and well, the committee has been formed that's going to write that constitution. And for every socialist on the committee, there are two capitalists. So Chile is going to write a very business friendly constitution with strong social checks on it. So I'm optimistic about the constitution that's coming out. And at the same time, Chile is one of the major producers of lithium and nickel in the world. And until, and up until now, they have been exporting the ore to China, and China's been doing the refining. And if you know anything about refining, you'll know that the bulk of the profit comes from the refined metal, not from the ore. And now Chile is putting export controls on the ore, and they're requiring refineries to be built in Chile so that they can process the nickel and the lithium on site and keep those profits in the country. When you combine that with a more business friendly constitution, assuming they actually pull that off, then Chile is going to become extremely wealthy. They've been doing pretty well lately, but there's one thing about having a next door neighbor. You always hate your next door neighbor. So the fact that Argentina has really high inflation means that the Chileans are highly motivated to succeed and do well and not be like those Argentinians over there who are doing everything wrong. So they've got that as a good reason. And then they've got all these other reasons. Chile is about to boom.
So when you say business friendly, does that mean they're going to give a bunch of corporate welfare out, or they're actually going to be capitalist?
That's the question, because we're talking, regardless of what their ideologies are, we're talking about a lot of politicians writing a constitution.
Yes, and
I don't know what it's going to be.
And we're also talking about allegedly politically connected capitalists.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's the big question here. That's a huge question.
It is. It's a very serious question.
I really wonder if there are any capitalists, or if there will be any capitalists after 2020. I mean, we certainly have people who want to get rich via rent seeking and want to bribe politicians to get rich. But do we have any capitalists? I mean, well, we have small business owners, but
yeah, small business owners who start things out of their garage, like Steve and Steve. You remember them, don't you?
Yes, Steve and Steve. Yes, Jobs and Wozniak. Yes,
Yeah, they were a small business owner.
Yeah, I wonder where that's going to go. Yeah.
And if you're a good small business owner, the next thing you know, even in a corrupt area, you can get extremely popular and extremely wealthy very fast. Then there's that guy who got started with PayPal and then went off to shoot rockets off in the desert. And then the guy who decided to sell books over the internet. All of these mega corporations, Microsoft, Amazon, um, Apple, even Facebook, these all started as small businesses. And when the big businesses get corrupt and you have all the rent seeking, what you're also doing is you're creating an opportunity for somebody to come in and provide a quality product at a reasonable price.
Do you think we'll ever get to a point though where these super rich billionaires don't try to engage in rent seeking? Because that's what I mean, are we going to have a Henry Reardon who stays a Henry Reardon and does not become an Orrin Boyle? I think that's a serious question, because most of them do become Orrin Boyles.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, and they do it just because I think they do it either because it's easier or because they can get away with it.
There's a more insidious reason why that happens.
What do you think it is?
Pessimistic, negative side of me? Here it comes. When you have centralized control of banking and lending and monetary policy, all big businesses becomes corrupted. Because when Microsoft first got big, they didn't have lobbyists. So Congress blasted them. Congress came in and tried to take over Microsoft. So then Bill Gates had to hire lobbyists. And once he got lobbyists on board, now he's in this incestuous cycle with Washington where he is now a rent seeker. And look at some of the crap that he pulls. Now, Windows, I'm operating on Windows right now. I love it. It's a little frustrating in some ways. And I wish Bill Gates created a better product than he did. And I continue to use his product because it's the best on the market. Linux does some pretty decent stuff, but Windows is still better. And as long as Bill Gates continues to put out a superior product, His rent seeking is just an annoyance, and Linux continues to be number two.
Well,
And
he's rent seeking in other areas, though. I mean,
yeah,
look at how he helped bring about this entire COVID scam.
mhm. He's also building small modular nuclear reactors. And if he pulls that feat off, he's building what he's got permission to build one, and they've started, I believe, in Wyoming. And it's expected to come online by 2028, within 5 years. And if that works, he's going to start it on an assembly line, and you're going to get small modular reactors that produce 350 megawatts coming off an assembly line. And then the lawsuits that are usually associated with building nuclear power plants, most of those will go away. You'll be able to sue the assembly line once. And once you have a product, it's good to go. And then once you have a power plant already in place, you don't need more environmental studies. This is a coal plant. Okay, we're taking out the coal burner. We're going to put in a small modular reactor.
Yeah,
Suddenly, you've got clean electricity that's extraordinarily safe and reliable, and you can daisy chain these small modular reactors to any size that you want. And that's what Bill Gates is doing. And he's using rent seeking to do some of that too. And I've got a lot of problems with his rent seeking. I'm totally fine with him
yeah.
making Gen 4 nuclear reactors, good software, good services. Microsoft Teams, I don't use it, but it's actually pretty nice. I like it, but I don't use it. But I do
Well,
use Windows.
well, one thing you said about Linux, you do realize though that the Droid OS is mostly based on the BSD kernel, which also goes back to
Yeah,
Unix. So
yeah.
basically,
Android is just Linux.
we are
Android
using
is.
Linux, yes, and Mac OS 10 is sort of off that too. So Unix and its variants basically have taken over, and we're only using. I mean, and Windows phones completely bombed, and Windows tablets completely bombed.
Well, here's the thing about Windows.
Yeah,
It's free. You don't have to pay for Windows anymore. The only time you have to pay for Windows is if you want special services. If all you want is an operating system and you're willing to put up with a Microsoft watermark and the occasional reminder that you need to license your product, it's free. And as long as rent seekers are giving away their flagship product for free, I figure I can tolerate their rent seeking. And yeah, he's rent seeking in other areas. There's other problems. And if he's breaking any laws, I would love to see him go to jail for it. I'm still pretty happy with Windows. I'm pretty happy with the nuclear. I'm pretty happy with a lot of the other things he's doing. He's trying to eradicate malaria or AIDS or something in Africa. And he's making decent progress there. I don't follow it too closely, but he wants to give himself a good image. Power to him. It's his money. He can do what he wants with it. The thing is, though, between crypto and nuclear power and solar power and the internet and smartphones, people who are trying to pursue rent are getting blasted out of the water left, right, and center. They will always be there. Lots of grift will always be around. But as we get better at sharing information, as people are taking cameras and recording devices in their in their pockets with them into all of these dark backroom meetings, more and more of it gets out. And there's the
yeah,
best way to fight corruption is just competition. If you've got
yeah,
one rent-seeking company on one side, but you've got an honest, hardworking company on the other side, the honest, hardworking company is more likely to give you a quality product at a lower price than the corrupt rent-seeking company. That's
maybe.
why Microsoft stays clean, because they know Linux will eat their lunch and is eating their lunch.
The other thing about grifting, we talk about grifting, but there's a lot of people, like we were talking earlier. There's so many people in the self-help industry, I think, that are a bunch of grifters, and
All of it,
we,
all of it. There might be one or two decent people there, but almost the
well,
entire.
yeah, there's some people out there who will give you, there's some people out there who will give you good advice, and and we mentioned Tate. I think Tate's a grifter, but the only course of Andrew Tate's that I would ever consider buying, I don't know if he offers it anymore, but for a while he was offering a chess course, And his father actually was a very well-respected chess master. So I figure, okay, he probably knows what he's talking about here with chess.
Really? That
But
is very
you know,
interesting. Really?
but Edward, and as I've said it, those, as bad as the men are that prey on, that kind of prey on gullible men, the women who prey on the gullible women are even worse. Is there anything you want to say before we go, Ed?
No, I think we've had a good conversation today.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, Well, I'm Chris Baker. You can subscribe to my Substack at fountainheadforum.com. Subscribe to the video, and of course, go buy my novel Escape from the Village. This is Ed Hoefer's second time on. Thanks for coming on, Ed. It's been a good conversation. I'm Chris Baker. We're out.